afternoon, everyone. As you are all coming in, it's lovely to see everybody here. We are now going into our first concurrent session of the afternoon, From Fed to Business Owner, Tips for Disabled New Entrepreneurs Leaving Federal Government. So happy to have you. I'm Nikki Powis with National Disability Institute. And just a few quick housekeeping. If you've been already at several sessions and heard me say this about 10 times now, I am very sorry, but we are having people that are popping in new for each session, so it's kind of important. So those captions, if you need those, can be found by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can also access the captions in both English or Spanish via the stream text by clicking the link that is in your chat box. ASL interpretation has been arranged for all of our sessions, and those interpreters will alternate throughout the event. If you have any questions for the presenters during the session, please put those in the Q&A. We will try to get to as many as we can. Please don't use the chat box for those questions because that gets quite busy and we may miss a question. So use that Q&A for questions for the presenters. Also, you can use the Q&A if you have any tech issues, or you can click on the live chat button in the menu bar and use the technical support chat room. And if neither of those things are working for you, you can also email us at info@disabilitysmallbusiness.org for assistance. The slides for this session and all of our sessions are already available for you, and they can be found by clicking on the session on the live events page of the website. All right, so now we are fortunate to have with us this afternoon wonderful and good friend over the years of mine, Jonathan Katz-Ouziel. Oh, you know what, Jonathan? I did not ask you how to say your new hyphenated last name. So I'm going to let you repeat that because I probably messed it up. Founder of Opossum House Accessibility, and Tiffany Meehan, founder and CEO of Full Circle Access. They are both disabled former federal employees who are now entrepreneurs, who are going to be sharing how to apply skills from your time in the public sector to set your new business up for success. So, Jonathan, I am going to turn it over to you and Tiffany.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We slightly renamed it to Feds Building Businesses, Tips for Disabled Entrepreneurs Starting a Business During or After Federal Employment. My name is Jonathan Katz-Ouziel. I am the founder of Opossum House Accessibility. I'm a bearded white man with glasses, and I'm wearing a sweater vest. And I'm really excited to present with Tiffany. Tiffany?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Meehan. I am the founder of Full Circle Access, and I am wearing a blue sweater. I have dark brown hair, and I am wearing pink lipstick. And I'm really excited to be here and join Jonathan, and really just excited to share more about how we met and how we are kind of thriving as entrepreneurs now.
Perfect. Thanks. Next slide, please. So just a quick agenda of what we're going to cover. We'll talk a little bit about who we are, what our businesses are, how we got started, and then what I think everyone's here for is some key advice for going from quote unquote Fed to entrepreneur. We'll talk about a few resources that have helped us. And then we will have some questions and answers. And please hold questions for the question and answer time at the end. And just as a reminder, I am a former federal employee. Tiffany is actually still currently employed, but she's speaking in her personal capacity. I'm speaking in my personal capacity. And even though this is about going from Fed to entrepreneur, we are speaking in our personal capacities. With that said, let's get started. So next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it back to Tiffany.
Okay, so a little about me. I have a very strong background in events and accessibility. I have been a policy advisor at DOL with Jonathan since last January, and I started Full Circle Access earlier this year, which is the first personalization platform for live entertainment. And what that means is we are bridging the connection between guests and venues and the features that they have. So we're starting with concerts and sports and music festivals, and looking to build accessibility into every step of the way with guest experience. My background also, I've come from startup world, and I was doing marketing at a Series A HR tech startup, which is what led into DOL. So I am also a wheelchair user, and I use a wheelchair since birth. And for me, obviously, my disability is visible. So I've had a very kind of, I think, unique experience with navigating becoming an entrepreneur. And yeah, so I'm really glad to be here. And I'm going to throw it back to Jonathan.
Next slide, please. And then Tiffany, I think this is for you as
Yes.
full circle
Okay.
access. Yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit more about Full Circle Access. We are building the platform to centralize all of the information that currently exists for events. So right now you have to Google, you have to go to Yelp, you use Reddit, you go to the websites. There's all these different places to find the information that you need. And for a lot of people, when you say wheelchair accessible, what does that mean? So we provide those details behind venue features, and not just for accessibility, but for all features. So if a festival has a cooling tent, those types of features for a concert, we are taking that information and giving that to the venues so they can prepare in advance. So we're looking to kind of create a universal, accessible experience from the start for everybody as they age. We like to kind of think of ourselves as the Netflix for live events, or the Waze for live events. That same type of gamification we're looking to bring to experiences that every other industry has, with personalization, except for live events. So I would love for you to follow us. We're at fullcircleaccess.co. And yeah, so I'll throw it back to Jonathan.
Next slide, please. Thanks. So a little bit about me. I am an accessibility professional, and I've been doing accessibility for over a decade now. I've worked in New York City government. I've worked in local government in both Montgomery and Prince George's County here in Maryland. And until April, I was a policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Disability and Employment Policy. A little bit, a couple of other fun facts about me. I am autistic and I have obsessive compulsive disorder. But a lot of my experience, both in these government roles and in other freelance work that I've done, has been really on other disability experiences. I've specialized a lot in three areas. Digital accessibility, so think documents especially, but also websites, intranets, events like this. Cognitive accessibility, so support for people living with cognitive disabilities such as autism, but also dementia, traumatic brain injury, intellectual disability, and then the accessibility of services and programs. When people are accessing something through a private company or through a government form, how to make that usable and doable for people with disabilities. I've published research and work separate from this on cognitive accessibility, particularly on dementia, through the American Planning Association and other organizations. And I've done a lot of published work and research on creating more and better and more accessible public restrooms. And what I really love about accessibility is the everyday poetry of it, how it's this very stimulating thing, almost like solving a puzzle with real impact, but it's also all these little things that work together. To quote the popular Alex Warren song, Ordinary, it's making the mundane our masterpiece. Next slide, please. And a little bit about Opossum House Accessibility. It's a solo consultancy, and it's really the LLC version of me. Um, I am a single person LLC in Maryland. Um, I am based here in Maryland, and I really see myself as helping people with doing accessibility in a resourceful way. This is the origin of the name. So it's called Opossum House for two reasons. One is this is the company version of me, and I like opossums. But the second version thing is that opossums are very resourceful animals, and they take things around them and make the former dens of other animals accessible for them. And that's what we want to do with accessibility, is use what's around us to make things more accessible for everyone. I provided quite a number of services, accessibility audits, customized training. I review and revise products. I provide support for accessible event planning, which links up with what Tiffany's doing, and any custom accessibility services people need. Currently, I'm working with several nonprofits and a couple of community colleges, some of which are also local government agencies, especially right now on the product review and process review side, and revising products and processes to be better for people with disabilities. And a fun fact, my logo, which is on the left, it's a stylized opossum in a greenhouse. That was designed by NDI partner Heather Lover. But yeah, next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways we got started. So next slide, please. So Tiffany, back to you.
Yeah, so I started my career in concert. Worked at 930 Club, going to in DC, and started doing concert production both at GW and at IMP and 930. So I really got the full experience of how events can be really accessible because it's working. And there was one instance where I had an artist that had hurt his knee and he was able to kind of get around backstage, and he thought that that was all done for him that morning. And it kind of, made me laugh, but also that was the whole point, that if you build things with that, a ramp instead of steps, everyone can use it. So that kind of stuck with me. And a few years ago, I went to a show at Madison Square Garden, and I had front row seats. I had accessible seats, and house policy allows people to stand in the front row. So I couldn't see anything the whole time. And that was just kind of house policy. So I started to rethink, what can I do to improve the experience, as my going to events hasn't really changed ever for me. And I started to think about how we can use the tech to do that, but also to bring accessibility into it. Because a lot of times the event and tech that's being created is not. So I started to kind of think about all those pieces. And then I started at ODEP last January. So I came in, and it's been definitely unpredictable. I'm on furlough now, but in my break, when I was Doge in February, I was able to start Full Circle Access, and really just kind of took, the courage to just start calling a lot of investors that I knew, a lot of friends in business that I knew and in the industry, and just started telling them my idea about what I wanted to do. And every single person said, just start. You just have to start. So that's kind of how I got going. And it's been, less than a year, but we have a product team, we have an advisory board. So it's building out really quickly, but really thoughtfully. So what else do I have here? Yeah, so bootstrapping was a big thing. Jonathan's going to get into like a little bit more on his background. I started really with zero, and just kind of, I considered investing in myself, and I started to go through the kind of legal process, incorporating, and all of those pieces. And that's what I was working on, kind of to start everything. And right now, we are close to closing our friends and family round. And yeah, so I'm in the whole funding process now.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yes. So with Full Circle right now, we are looking to build our MVP out and then have a pilot program. So we're looking to go to a few different cities and really pilot with the venues in those cities for concerts and sports and a festival. So we're really, really focusing on how we can kind of connect accessibility to ROI and build that in authentically for businesses so that they can have better experiences for their guests, but also they can have future-proof their audience, so that they can continue coming to their venue and just create, a better experience for everyone. And for right now, so I can tell a little bit more about the features. So when we say things like venue features, we're saying things like step-free routes instead of just wheelchair accessible. Bathrooms, right? Like, do the bathrooms have automatic sinks? Where are the soap dispensers? Are they against the wall? Are they lower? So those types of details that I know I'm always thinking about also benefit kids and little people. So it's just that whole idea of really kind of mapping out these venues and allowing people to kind of check in and let other people know what is available or what's not available or what should be there. So those are all the kind of pieces we're blending together now with our app that should be out in about 6 months. So really excited to be building all of this now.
Thanks very much, Tiffany.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide.
And so a little bit about me. So on the left, there is a picture of me holding a box of business cards that say Opossum House Accessibility with my name and number and email, and also brailled versions of it, the information. So a little bit about this is that I actually started thinking about this before the election. I missed doing a lot of the hands-on accessibility work, which is harder to do in federal government. So I'd actually already started planning for this in 2024. My original plan was to launch in 2027 when my boss was planning to retire. Um, and originally, I really wanted to work with local governments, small municipalities where oftentimes they don't have the resources or the budget or even need for someone full time, but need to bring in consultants for specific accessibility related tasks. But based on some of the planning, even before the election, I broadened that because there's a lot of different interesting things where people need support with accessibility. Um, as we all know, there was an election about a year ago, and a lot of things started changing in the federal government even before inauguration. So I decided to accelerate the timeline because it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to do the same kind of job that I had been doing for my 4 years in federal government. Um, and that there were going to be changes that, it was the right time to move. So there was an second offer of the deferred resignation program in April, and I actually decided to take it. And so I was able to use savings that I was lucky enough to have built up from 10 years of white collar work, but also the DRP payments, not just to cover my living expenses, but also for initial launch capital. Throughout this time, starting in even before the election, I was networking with entrepreneurs in and out of the accessibility space and other solo consultants, people that I had met through my work and also through just even messaging people on LinkedIn. I also got support from the Maryland Small Business Development Center. I know we've gotten a couple of shout outs to the small business development centers at this conference. They're really awesome. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I was incorporated in April 2025, a week before my last working day at Labor. I launched in June and July of 2025, and I actually got to take my first client in that month. Next slide, please. So what are my goals? I'd like to build a sustainable long-term solo consultancy, which is a process that takes time. I know that our colleagues from Delaware in the plenary session were talking about how these things can take a time to build. And I really want to stay solo. One other motivation for me to start a business is that it was very clear that for the next step in a career, if I was going to be employed by other people, I was going to need to be a supervisor, which did not want. I'd like to work either as a prime contractor where I hold the contract or subcontractor on targeted accessibility projects. So far, even having just started, I've actually gotten to do both. I'm working with the community colleges as a subcontractor, actually technically separate from my Opossum House work, but also I have a prime contract with a client that actually Tiffany connected me with. And eventually, I want to really focus on the intersection of physical and digital accessibility for clients who really need to be thinking about both at the same time. Oftentimes, those are bifurcated, and one of the ways I can set myself apart is that I am fairly fluent in both standards. And my goal for any, and this is a good metric for any of you looking to become solo consultant, is to eventually average about 1,300 to 1,400 billable hours a year, usually leading towards 1,300. But that's a bit about me. And the next slide. And Tiffany, I can launch this for us. We met as colleagues at ODEP. I was actually on Tiffany's first interview panel, which was really great. And that's actually the first time I got to meet her. And obviously she did very well because we both ended up at ODEP, and we've actually been collaborating about this for a year now. And Tiffany.
Yeah, so we both took the DRP in April. So we didn't have too much time together, but it was great to work with Jonathan, especially in the employer kind of resource. I was coming from the accessible tech background. So just being with ODEP and kind of learning from everyone has been really wonderful. And so what we've been doing since ever since the DRP ended in really September, I would say, we've been meeting regularly and just having like check-in meetings with each other, just seeing how everything's going, how we can help, what intros we can make for each other. The great thing with the disability community is it's really small and it's really kind, and so I think if you know someone through someone, it's a really nice way to get to network with people, and people are really helpful and want to give feedback. So we've just been doing that, and we, like Jonathan said, I met some people and I immediately think of him and connect him. So um, it's really important, I think, to build a community like that and to be referring, within, and just that's how we really believe that we're going to make a lot of progress, especially now. There's a lot of things that we're working on and excited about, but that's the biggest thing. We've always connected on accessibility.
Perfect. Thank you. Next slide, please.
We can go to the
So,
next slide.
yep. So we have some tips for launching, and this is the meat of the presentation, really. So next slide. And so what we really want to start off with is we want to remind you that you can do it. Starting a business is hard, and each business is going to look different. We've seen already that there are disabled folks across the country starting businesses in all sorts of industries and fields. And remember that just because one person's journey is looking one way doesn't mean your journey has to look another way. Each entrepreneur is going to have a different journey. But we really strongly believe that your skills as a civil servant will benefit you and your business in any industry, and that even though it's hard, you can do it. And so we wanted to begin by framing it with this. And there's a phrase from my friend Matthew Lowe, who is an author, a disabled social worker. In his book, Seeing the Forest and the Trees, there's the cover on the left side, Seeing the Forest and the Trees, Mapping Your Inner World for Greater Clarity and Satisfaction in Life, with the trees on the cover. And he says despair is part of the process. And it's very hard because sometimes, even when you're having success, you're going to feel that despair. You're going to feel that angst. And I think remembering, even though it's hard for us, even though for me as an autistic person, it can be very hard, that's helpful to remember, because it's also a reminder for us to seek help, but also know that this despair is not going to last forever. And just a note, please buy his book, and the cover is used with his permission. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with financing and money. We both started with minimal investments. So for me, I used, again, my savings and the DRP buyout to launch. It's very different for a solo consultant. And Tiffany has needed to use a different financial strategy for her work. Tiffany?
Yeah, so I have started, like I mentioned, kind of investing in myself. So really looking at savings and using that time really wisely with kind of not a break, but it was allowed me to launch everything, and really just working, going to events, meeting people, and looking in my community as far as what available resources are available through local government, different things, especially disability accelerators have been really helpful. And just again, the community is small, so it's really nice to meet someone and then they intro you to someone else, and just kind of in this space right now of angel investors and kind of learning. It's the same as a job interview. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So it's not.
Tiffany, if you're speaking, you're not coming through. Tiffany, you might want to turn off your camera just to improve bandwidth.
Yeah, I'm gonna go off camera.
That's coming through better. So continue.
Perfect. I'm kind of looking at the runway that we have to get through all the phases. So we're building the MVP with friends and family round, and then we are going just through the stages with it. And I think it's really important with the financing to ask questions. And I think of a lot of it as like scholarships when you're going to college. There's a lot of money and resources out there, but you have to really search for it. And then, of course, it always helps when someone else has been through it. So there's a lot of great disability led and founded nonprofits like Together International is a really great one. They just connect people, and especially disabled founders, with resources, and they have their own accelerator. So really looking at what is available, and asking, and just not being afraid to send a LinkedIn message, and asking questions about how someone got started.
Yep, thank you. And so, and again, this is a beautiful highlight of that we have different investment needs. For me as a solo consultant, I could really plan for a shorter time to start earning revenue. Most folks who start as solo consultants, they take a few months because they usually are also having a full-time job on top. One of the silver linings of the DRP is that it basically meant for 2.5 months, my job was to just set up everything to launch. And so I was able to really launch pretty much 2.5 months after going. Now, again, if you are starting a larger business, consider joining an accelerator or an incubator. There are many different opportunities for that across the country, including through SBDCs. And we also know with financing that many of you are coming in from different situations. So if you, for example, are on SSI, SSDI, if you are also navigating other sorts of benefits, if you have other financial complexities such as upcoming marriage, upcoming divorce, kids, guardianship, NDI has a lot of really great resources that can help you navigate that process. But that's a bit about financing. And next slide, please. So we do need to talk a little bit about ethics, and there are some differences between when you're currently a federal employee, technically or not, and then when you have been a federal employee. So Tiffany will start us off with talking about the current situation.
Yes. So when I started in January, I immediately was connected to the ethics office. So it was just a simple ask to my supervisor and team. And a lot of people have done this with second jobs and things. So I just had to go kind of through the process of meeting with the ethics team and just letting them know what I was doing and kind of getting the all clear since I'm not making revenue. So it was more of a hobby situation, which is great, and also like allows me to continue to build. But once I would start making any money, I would need to like let them know and fill out a form and the whole thing. So I think the biggest thing that I've taken away is just to really divide time, and just you have your personal computer, you have your work computer, and just keeping everything separate and time separate and not having any overlap. It's also very busy in the office. So to even be doing two things at once would be very hard. But that's just, I've always kind of played it safe with this and kind of kept everything separate. And then, of course, if you are working with someone and you've worked with them in the OJEP capacity, then you would have to recuse yourself or let them know, kind of thing. And so that has been a really, I haven't really been in the office a ton, so haven't run into that yet. But that's just always been kind of in the back of my mind as we're building full circle right now. And the biggest thing is, everyone I think would understand is just to always, if you have a question, ask them. Just write an email and ask them. They're very helpful, they're very responsive, and it's always better to be safe than sorry, especially in this situation.
So, and then this is for me. This is for me as a former federal employee, is that there are a couple of restrictions that apply after you're a federal employee. And if you're a state employee, there are different states have parallel versions of these rules. So first, if you worked on enforcing a specific policy or law, or you helped write regulations, um, you cannot represent clients in front of the federal government on those matters for the rest of your life. If you were a procurement professional or enforcement professional, there are some specific tricky regulations around there. I'm not as familiar with those because I was not in enforcement or procurement. But because, for example, I worked on the rewrite of the 504 rule for the Department of Health and Human Services as part of a rotation, I cannot represent clients on 504 related matters in front of for federal agencies. This limits, of course, what federal contracts I can work on, or if I do end up working on them, what that involvement looks like. Now, if you don't plan to work with the federal government or represent clients to federal agencies, which for me it's going to probably be most of the time, for example, these rules tend not to apply. And again, you actually have lifelong access to your ethics office from your former agency or ethics offices from other agencies if your agency was unfortunately dismantled. And if you have a question, that's really the first place to go. I've actually been able to get very fast responses from the ethics office, for example, on rules around expert witnessing. So next slide, please. Now, going from ethics to the sort of the joyous part, is that really one of the great things is that you can use your connection because there is no ban on working with people who you met through the federal government. And as federal employees, whether whether you were, for example, just doing customer service outreach or in the enforcement wing, you probably know people from across the country. These folks could be future clients. Again, there are some specific rules there, but that's usually not a ban, and oftentimes people end up working for their connections after federal government when they don't start a business. They can also link you to clients. So Tiffany, for example, has actually linked me to my biggest client right now. Thank you, Tiffany. Um, they can also help you understand or find investors if you're at that type of financing stage. And also, they're really great for giving advice. When I started the business, because I knew Nikki and Caroline from NDI from my work, I actually had a few phone calls with them where just chatting with them was really helpful. And all of this was very similar to the way we often learned about opportunities, projects, or initiatives in our federal careers. And Tiffany, would you like to speak a little bit more about external networks and word of mouth?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned the same thing. I think with the work that we're doing, there's a lot of great ways to find people on LinkedIn or within like different communities on LinkedIn, different groups. I think events are still like a really great way, webinars and in person if you can, kind of thing. It really helps just word of mouth kind of thing. And I was at an event in September, Disability Showcase, and I've met so many people from that still. Almost like I'm almost what a month and a half later, I'm still having meetings and just kind of touching base and having second meetings with people. So I think it's just that kind of community that is really great just to talk to people and build that. So that is really helpful. And also the same thing around if you see something that you want to be into or you want an intro to, not being hesitant about just asking or seeing if you just do a cold message out to them. But for the most part, that's the thing. I think people are really responsive and want to help, especially if you have like a very clear ask or you want to have 20 minutes and coffee kind of thing. That's always really helpful to kind of plan out the times and meetings and stuff.
Thanks. And next slide, please. So there are a couple of day-to-day differences we want to highlight. One of the biggest ones is that you have no supervisor, which can be great in some respects, depending on your supervisor. And it does mean you have a lot of freedom. We know that federal government can be very top-down, right from the secretary level down. But it also means you don't have necessarily a safety net when things get overwhelming or when you need help with something. I absolutely love my former supervisor from labor, Lou. Um, and when I worked for labor, if there was something that was overwhelming, I could meet with Lou to figure out, okay, how can we address this? You don't necessarily have that. So you often have to build a system for yourself. Um, Time often goes faster when you're self-employed because oftentimes there's just additional tasks that you need to do. And later on, we're going to recommend a few tools that have really helped us with that. And then Tiffany, do you want to speak a little bit about flexibility?
Yes, I think it's really important because you have your own schedule, but you are kind of used to going all the time. Definitely time blocking things and listening, to your gut, your body when you need to take a break. I always kind of say my 3-year-old dog is like a great litmus test, and if he's hungry, then I should get a snack, and if he needs to go to the bathroom, like I need to take a break. So those types of things and like listening, it really helps, especially when you have longer days and not feeling like, you only got 6 hours done today, but you might do 12 hours the next day. So just kind of listening, and when your social battery is full, really kind of respecting that, but also like, finding different outlets and different things so you don't feel like you're always working, especially when you're home. It's really important. I just feel like to go to the movies. I love going to the movies by myself and just kind of getting out of that space a little bit. And I always come back more refreshed.
Thanks so much. And yeah, and for me, like many autistic people, I have a lot of sensory triggers. And so one of the nice things of being day to day is that when I was in the office, I couldn't necessarily turn off my computer and go lie down for 20 minutes if I had too much light. But now, if as long as I'm not in a meeting, I can do that. And even if I'm in a meeting, I'm at home, I can make changes to the office and say, hey, to the person, the client or the partner I'm working with, just wait a sec. And that's been really great. And what I also love is you can see your direct impact right away. Um, and that's been really incredibly helpful because sometimes in federal government, we know it can just take a lot of time to see that impact. Next slide, please. And so I just quickly want to go through a couple of transferable skills. And I see there's a lot of really great questions and advice in the chat and in the Q&A. But a couple of things that you can take from your federal experience into starting your own business is one, oftentimes as a federal employee, you have skills with planning projects. We know how long and complicated doing many things in the government can be, everything from updating a form all the way to running a program. And starting and running a business is like one ongoing project. And so that skill, I have found that my skills that I built up in part during my federal employment and throughout my civil service career has been really helpful for me in terms of actually getting things through. In addition, we learn how to, you've improved your skills as a Fed in communicating with people from a range of backgrounds and communities, be it citizens from across the country or your different colleagues who come from all walks of life. And that's going to be helpful for you in business, whether it's marketing or working with other folks. We also learned patience, although that's one I personally need to work on, and how to work with a long project. We know how long things can take in federal government. And what I've often found is that I have an easier time handling, for example, the slowness of some procurement processes than some of my colleagues who haven't worked in federal government, because I've learned that skill of patience and how to plan around that unpredictability and the fact that sometimes things take longer than you expect. As federal employees, we often have to manage many moving parts, working with lots of documents, numbers, and trackers. Tiffany and I have both had to update some truly terrible documents, and we had to do this all with very limited resources. So how that how that takes place, that's something that you can take from federal government into your business, because you will have limited resources, especially when you start, especially when it's just you or you and a couple of people. And that's something where you have actually already learned that skill. And finally, a lot of feds say, hey, running a business just seems so complicated. I'd rather work for someone because it's a complicated system. But as federal employees, we have to navigate complicated systems every day. As I've told some folks, if you can fill out the SF-182 form that you have to fill out whenever you get training or learning or certain types of expenses, you can handle QuickBooks. Like, you have navigated complicated systems before in your day-to-day as a federal employee. No shame in asking for help, but it's also, this is something that you can bring to running a business. Next slides, please. And again, remember to ask for help early and often. And we'll talk a little bit about that in resources. I can see we're coming closer to time. So we're going to go just quickly run through some of the resources that have helped us. Next, yeah. So I'll do this slide and then Tiffany's going to have the bigger one. Next slide. So some funding and mentorship resources. As you know, you're here. The NDI Small Business Hub has been really helpful. In addition, America's Small Business Development Center, there's a national network across every state and territory in the District of Columbia of small business development centers that support people living with people running businesses across the country. My advisor, Mark, from the Maryland Small Business Development Center, has been amazing and really helped me think about what kind of marketing materials and documentation do I need. And also help me do some of the financial planning and game out different scenarios. You can also get mentors through SCORE. I believe SCORE is actually in the exhibit hall. Many local governments also have business offices that offer different types of assistance and sometimes even incubators. Montgomery and Prince George's counties in Maryland both have offices. Tiffany's in Loudoun County in Virginia, which has Loudoun County Economic Development. And I need to give a shout out to New York City government. New York City Department of Small Business Services is not only great if you're anywhere in the 5 boroughs, but I actually worked for them for 4 years, and I'm a proud alum of that from before my federal time. And I popped that link in the chat. Next slide, Tiffany, over to you.
Yes, so Enabled Ventures has been really great. They're very focused on disability founders and, again, kind of connecting the support and resources that you need. So Loudoun County Economic Development has been wonderful. Loudoun Chamber of Commerce, just kind of really looking at what resources are available. And especially with Loudoun County, there are full-time staffers for these specific reasons. So I had a request around an investor had a question and she immediately was able to pull some resources for me. So I didn't even know that existed before I started kind of looking more into what was available. And then, of course, Disability In. Jonathan, I actually went to an event a few months ago and it was great to see everyone there. And the big focus was on business. And I met a lot of entrepreneurs there as well. And so also kind of searching, well, it was small business I did not do with the federal government. I didn't do this loan, but I know there's a lot of grants and things that are available. And then, of course, like the VR programs, they're all really great and a really, they're a resource there to help specifically for business questions. So a lot of them have business leads, which is really helpful. And then, of course, like the grants and pitch contests. So a lot of those accelerators have some type of contest or component, and it's available for funding or a prize. But really, it's just to kind of get around other founders and learn. And I've just learned so much just being in that space and the same kind of idea. It feels a little bit like summer camp that you kind of go in and you all kind of leave, but that's the whole point of sharing resources and connections and things like that.
And next slide, please. And remember to ask your friends and family for help. This can be, and this doesn't just have to be monetary, just being able to ask my father-in-law, for example, for advice on running a business, or my mom who ran a business. That's been really helpful. Or just bouncing ideas off with friends has been really great. Even earlier this week, I spoke with my friend Michaela, who was really helpful for me in remembering how to pace myself. And Tiffany, is there anything you wanted to add here?
No, I mean, this has been kind of really great to have like family support and, the long hours kind of thing. But it's that same idea of it's just kind of new coworkers when you're working from home and just kind of finding space for yourself. And again, just kind of taking breaks when you need them so that you can really be energized because it's a marathon. So and I'm just kind of starting, but it's exciting, but also it's being an entrepreneur is a lot of solo time. So just kind of keeping that in mind that you're going to have downtime, but it doesn't mean you have to be busy. You can just be recharging too.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. Next slide, please. So another thing we want to remind you is to make it accessible for you. So do things that help you keep and gain spoons, block time for your personal needs, and put things in your business model that include automation, accommodation, and anything that else that helps you or whoever you're working with. So a couple of examples for me, I cook. Cooking gives me spoons. I cook a lot, a lot, a lot. I actually have a food blog. Um, I also track my time, something I got very good with at federal government with having to deal with our timesheets so that it keeps me accountable that I log off at a normal hour each day. There's a temptation, and many people will tell you that you have to quote unquote grind all the time. But I think one power that we have as disabled employees and having worked in a federal government where there are rules about when you can and can't work, um, that really helps us turn off so that we are rested so that we can bring our energy to our work, but also to the ones we love. And then it started as a religious observance, but I also have a very strict no work on Saturday rule. And that means I always have that time every week where I'm not working and I'm doing other things. And Tiffany, how do you make it accessible for you?
So I always like to put on captions for meetings. So I have a transcript, so I don't have to kind of take notes during, so I can focus in. And then I always ask people if they prefer phone or video, and like today, it's kind of hybrid. But for if you're back-to-back meetings and all these things, I would rather you come, fully prepared to have a great call than worry about what you're wearing and different things. So those are kind of the biggest things. And then as far as like Zoom, all of those captioning and transcripts features. But I'm always asking people the same thing. If we're having a meeting, is there anything outside of captioning or transcripts that you might need, and just being very upfront about it. I think that's just the biggest thing is asking people what they need to be successful.
Thanks. Next slide, please. And then just quickly running through some of the tools we use to help us manage. I use Google Workspace. I use a lot of spreadsheets. I have a old-fashioned pack of notebooks. I use QuickBooks. I use LinkedIn. And then I want to give a shout out to a product called Katz-Ouziel, which was started by NDI partner Hallie Flynn, and it's a simplified project management software. And that's good for a couple of my more complicated projects where I have to, for example, be thinking about a project that's lasting until July of next year. And Tiffany, what do you use?
So I really like Motion to help with time blocking and emails. It's connected there. And then QuickBooks is really helpful to get in the habit of receipts and scanning receipts in, and eventually, having all of that information there. And then Slack is just the best for dropping information. If I find like a news article for the team, I can just share it there. It's not so formal like an email, and it allows that real time collaboration, which is very important when we're all remote. So that's been the big thing. And then also my like tip is always when you start a free trial, always set it on like a calendar alert, because it's helpful always to kind of trial and test. But I've often forgotten because I didn't put it on my calendar. So that's very helpful to manage that.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So I know we only have a couple of minutes for questions. And Nikki, I did spot two questions already in the Q&A. And thank you guys for your attention. So Tiffany, this one I think is for you. Yael Warshel asks, do you have advice on finding angel investors?
So I have been keeping a spreadsheet in Excel. But what I have found is LinkedIn is really, really good. If you follow, like, I'm following a lot of women, minority kind of founder VCs, and those VCs will post like lists of people. So I've been keeping, if I see that, I save it and then put it on my list. But definitely looking on LinkedIn, a lot of investors are just on LinkedIn and they're very open to it. And what I got like a very helpful advice was my friend who has a startup, and he was kind of saying like, this is what VCs do. They're used to having meetings, so don't feel like uncomfortable reaching out or you're bothering them. Like that's their whole thing. So same thing with angel investors. They want to invest. A lot of people have approached me just to saying that they were interested, and even if it's a small amount, they're just kind of getting into it. So again, it kind of just goes back to relationship building and just being excited about what you're doing, what you're building. And then I think kind of resonates, and then you'll start finding those people. But never be afraid to kind of say where you're at with funding, and just be very open. That's kind of that's the business part of it, is that it's not weird to ask that or anything. But I would definitely look at LinkedIn.
Thank you, Tiffany. And then Yael already wrote thanks and for the point about it being okay to reach out. That's really great. And then one more question that I know we have time for is Jason Shaw asks, was it less of a challenge to write a business plan if you were applying your experience to the government sector, knowing how the government works, if your clients or customers are related to the government? I will say personally for me, yes. Before federal government, I did work in local government. So some of this was also, I was able to apply that experience from working and having done both the technical work and been on quote unquote to both sides of the desk. If you're doing something that's more closely related to your government job, that, for example, is going to be helpful. For example, if you were an ASL interpreter in a federal agency, and then you decided to switch over to being a private interpreter for municipal government, that would be helpful. But then sometimes that would be, it really depends. If you're going from ASL interpreting to running a restaurant, it might help with managing budgets, but it's not going, it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question. Nikki, I know we're at 2:50. I can
Yeah.
see that. Yeah, I do just want to say that we do have a resource sheet that we are creating that we will send out, and I'll pop our emails into the chat, and it's also they're available on the slide deck on the NDI site. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Tiffany. Really appreciate you being here. And yes, please reach out to either or both of them for any questions that did not get answered today. You were talking about interpreters, and we do need to give those interpreters a few minutes to get to their next session and have a quick break. So we are going to end this session. Reminder, please go into the live events page and click on the survey feedback for the session. We'd love to hear from you. And you can go check out the booths in the exhibit hall while you wait for the next session. And reminder, you won't be able to get into the next session until 2 minutes before it starts. Okay, with that, we are going to say goodbye for this. Jonathan, again, Tiffany, thank you so much. And we will see you in the next session.